So here in our area off South Florida right here, we've got a variety of different deep drop opportunities. And what we're going to talk about tonight is depth. We're going to start on the shallow side and we're going to work our way out to the deep, okay? And when I say shallow, I'm talking, like I said earlier, a minimum of 400 feet. So from Miami to Palm Beach, and again, I'm getting right to the point here, from 400 feet to 450 feet. And that one zone, that one little avenue, we'll call it, there are an abundance of gray tilefish, okay, that we fish for. Gray tilefish average anywhere from, we'll say 1 to 2 pounds on the small side, the little guys, all the way on up to 7 or 8 pounds on the larger side. It's rare that we'll see a 10-pound gray tilefish here in our area. Not impossible, but rare. You catch one 5 to 8 pounds, that's a fairly large gray tilefish for this particular region, okay? Gray tilefish prefer mud. They are not well, I don't want to say they're not a structure-oriented species, they are, but the structure that they prefer is mud. They burrow in the mud. They make little cones, little caves, and they literally live in these little caves, and they protect those caves just like you protect your own home, okay? They're abundant. They are very, very abundant. They're so abundant where somebody said to me before, they said, you know, the problem with gray tilefish is that I go out, I do one drop, and I limit out because the federal regulations say that you are allowed to keep 2 gray tilefish. Well, who in the world wants to go deep dropping and get all this gear together and all your boat together and everything together to go out there and catch 2 fish this big? I don't want to. That's why I don't fish for gray tilefish in federal waters. I fish for gray tilefish in state waters. What is that defining line? 3 miles off the beach. So as long as you are within 3 miles of the beach, does anybody know how many gray tilefish you can keep? 100 pounds. That is exactly right. So if you are within 3 miles of the beach, you are permitted by law to harvest up to 100 pounds of gray tilefish. If you go zoop and go 3.1 miles, you're done. You're in federal waters. And you can't go back and forth. Keep that in mind, okay? And I know you guys are going to have some questions. I'm going to try and get through the whole seminar and address these questions. At the end of the seminar, whatever I don't cover, I'm going to be up here for as long as it takes. I'll answer those questions. But again, for example, Hillsborough Inlet, straight out the inlet, if you go out to 400, 420, 430 feet of water, you are still within 3 miles of the beach, which again means you are permitted to harvest up to 100 pounds of tilefish. Gray tilefish, not golden tilefish. Different animal altogether, and we're going to talk about that guy later. I'm not suggesting that you keep 100 pounds, but you could by law, okay? So when we're fishing for the gray tiles in that 400 to 450 foot kind of swath paralleling the coast, and again, that could be anywhere from Miami all the way on up to Palm Beach, and certainly in this area, I focus on Fort Lauderdale to Boca. That's kind of my zone for the gray tilefish, okay? The first thing that I do is I stay away from the power assist or the electric reels because I want it to be as sporty as possible. And the truth of the matter is I don't need an electric reel for the most part when I'm fishing 400 feet of water, all depending on the current. And that is the biggest challenge that we face in our area as deep droppers is the current. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go out, and that might be straight out Hillsborough Inlet, it might be down toward Fort Lauderdale, it might be up toward Boca, because I know that these gray tilefish are all up and down the coast. I'm not telling you this, you know, as a fable. I'm telling you this. They're there right now. If you went tomorrow morning, you will catch them, okay? They are there all year long. There are certain times of the year where you will see some larger fish, which are the males, but they're there all year long. Catching the gray tilefish is not about if the fish are there. Catching the gray tilefish is about if the conditions will allow you to catch the fish. Because if there's too much current, you can't present your bait properly. Tilefish associate to the bottom. Both gray tilefish, golden tilefish, they associate to that mud and they do not come off the bottom very far. They will only come a few feet off the bottom. We know this because we dropped the camera down. A GoPro in a hooker electric housing, dropped it right to the bottom, hooked up to the top of a deep drop rig, and we watched it. And we drifted over and over and over and recorded all the footage. Of course, we didn't know what sort of footage we were getting till we came back to the office and watched it. And we were amazed to watch these gray tilefish. They're like rats. Okay, they scoot around the bottom. They'll come up a foot or two off the bottom, then go right back to the bottom. That's why whenever you're deep dropping for the tilefish, 90% of the time, most of your action is going to be on the bottom hook because they don't like to come up off the bottom. So make sure that you're fishing, of course, very close to the bottom. And that's where the current comes into play. If you have a tremendous amount of current, it's hard to keep that rig right on the bottom. It really is. And sometimes you need to go to more weight. We start off with 16 to 20 ounces. Okay, my initial rig, if I'm going gray tile fishing tomorrow morning, I'm going to start off with a 16-ounce, 1-pound sinker. I'm going to start with a 2-hook rig, a very clean, simple rig, and we're going to talk a lot about different deep drop rigs. But you can see the sinker's right here. You've got a dropper loop with a hook right above it, and then a couple feet above that, you have a second hook. Right above that, you've got a little strobe, a little diamond light, okay, an LP diamond light. It's water activated, it blinks. These fish hunt by sight and by smell. They see that little light flashing, it attracts attention. It's almost like chum, like electric chum. They come sniffing over, they see your smelly squid on the hook because that's the best bait for tilefish, is squid, when it comes to the gray tilefish. And it works, and they eat your squid. But that rig has to be right on the bottom. Now keep in mind, in this particular scenario, I'm fishing an 8-foot rod, Chaos rod rated for 20 to 40 pound line, matched to a Daiwa size 50 reel, loaded with 30-pound braid, very, very thin, very important, because if I'm fishing 60 or 80-pound braid, I'm gonna need more lead to hold the bottom. Does that make sense? Everybody follow me there? The thinner the line, the better. I've even tried it with 20-pound tests because diamond braid, I fish diamond braid exclusively, is super, super strong. The problem with the 20-pound test, even though it's strong enough, when you're reeling up a couple of fish and the lead, it's so tight that it literally will cut your fingers. You know, it's like a razor. So the happy median on this lighter outfit is 30-pound test, 30-pound braid. That's all that you need fishing in that 400 to 500 foot range. Anything more than that is overkill and is going to require you to fish too much lead. 16 to 20 ounces will hold the bottom in everything up to 2 knots of current, okay, up to 2 knots. Keep in mind, when we are fishing, we drop our rig, of course, all the way to the bottom, and I fish with my spool open, my thumb on the spool, okay, the reel is open, and slowly I'm making sure that I'm contacting that bottom, okay? If I don't feel the bottom, I'm gonna back off a little bit and let some line out until that sinker hits the bottom. Does that make sense? Everybody follow me there? Because I know that that rig has to be very, very close to the bottom in order for me to catch fish, in order for me to catch those gray tilefish. Has to be right on the bottom. My reel is fast, okay, very fast, 6.4 to 1, okay? And I want a fast reel because I've got to reel up how much line? Oh, 500 feet. Okay, a lot of line. If this is a 1-to-1 gear ratio, like an old Penn Senator per se, you know, not 1-to-1, but slow, I'll be sitting here going like this forever. So I want a nice, fast reel, but a reel that also has plenty of torque. And this is a perfect reel for that, but there's a lot of different reels in this class that do the same thing. So nice, smooth reel, smooth drag, plenty of line capacity, 30-pound test, ultralight rod. I came into Marshall, you know, a number of years ago. I said, hey, I want you to build me a couple of deep drop rods, and I need them really, really light, okay? I want them under 1 pound. He said, what? I said, I want them under 1 pound. Titanium guides, you know, ultralight blank, thin foam grips, graphite reel seat, 15.9 ounces is what they came in on. So it's very light and comfortable to fish right under your arm for hours, all day long. And with this light aluminum Daiwa reel, it's comfortable and it's very, very sporty. And you'll notice this rod has a soft tip. So I can see that bite every time. You'll see that tip like that. You will notice the bite not only in the rod tip, but in your fingers. You will feel every single one of those golden tilefish bite. So the only other thing that you're going to catch out there, I'm sorry, I said golden tilefish. I meant to say gray tilefish. The only other thing that you're going to catch out there mixed with the gray tilefish are some vermilion snapper And every now and then you're going to get lucky and catch a snowy grouper. Not very often. Okay, I can tell you in, gosh, I'll say the last 3 years I've probably caught 4 snowy grouper. Okay, but they're there. They are there. And every now and then you'll be surprised by one. Now, a couple real important other things I want to mention here. On top of the braid, I've got a monofilament top shot. I've got 30 to 50 foot, a 50-pound test mono, okay, on top of the braid. You have to have that top shot. Do not fish your braid directly to the rig, okay, because what's happening is there's no stretch in braid, none. And as you're reeling up these fish, often one, usually 2 at a time, okay, these fish are going in different directions, the boat's going up and down, you need some give, you need something to act as a shock absorber. So you have to have some monofilament on top of the braid, okay? Really simple, but don't overdo it. You're not gonna put a 100-pound mono on top of 30-pound braid. Does that make sense? Okay, you're not gonna do it. So 50-pound mono, a top shot, on top of the 30-pound braid is a nice balance. The rig itself is 100-pound, and it's very, very streamlined. You can see this rig has no junk. That's what I call that stuff. The stuff that glows in the dark, the squids, the beads, the this, the that, you know, has none of that. It's very, very streamlined. Why? Because number one, stealth. Okay, I want this to be as stealthy and as natural of a presentation as possible. And B, the more junk that's on here, the harder it is to reel this up, right? You've got so much stuff on that rig, it makes a big difference. That's also why I only fish a 2-hook rig, because you add a 3rd hook, I don't need to reel in 3 fish at a time, not with this particular outfit. Catching 1 or 2 at a time, and I'm perfectly happy. Okay, so I keep it streamlined, I keep it simple. There are no 3-way swivels. I simply make a dropper loop right in my 100-pound test. I've got a 5.0 VMC Sure Set circle hook, and we're gonna talk a lot about circle hooks as this seminar goes on. And you have to fish circle hooks. Let me just pause for a second. All of deep dropping is all circle hooks, all of it. Do not fish J hooks on any of your rigs when you're deep dropping, and I don't care what you're targeting. It's all about circle hooks. You're not gonna set the hook on that fish with 500, 800, 1,200 feet of line out. You're not gonna do it. Let the hook do what it was designed to do and hook the fish on its own. So you've gotta have that top shot. You have to have a nice streamlined rig, very comfortable outfit that you can fish right under your arm for hours, right out here for the gray tilefish. That's the beginning stage of deep dropping in South Florida. That's the beginning of it all. You know, anything shallower than that is not deep dropping. Any questions real quick about this right now? I want to make sure that you understand this. Yes.
The length of the top shot was?
Length of the top shot's 30 to 50 feet. You do not need more than 30 to 50 feet of the 50-pound test braid, the 50-pound test mono on top of the 30-pound test braid, okay? 30 to 50 feet is plenty. Nice streamlined rig, 16 ounces, 2 hooks, dropper loops. This is it. And the reason this is on 100-pound, because remember what I said earlier, there are times when you're gonna catch a snowy grouper, or you get 2 big tilefish on at one time, and they're both going in opposite directions. One's going this way, one's going this way. You're gonna bust them off if you don't have a pretty heavy-duty leader. So you've gotta fish at least 100, or else it's gonna get really tangled as well. Yes?
How do you prove to the cop that pulls you over on the way in that you were remote?
That's an excellent question. His question is, how do you prove to the cop on the way in when he pulls you over and you have a cooler full of 100 pounds of tilefish? And you say, I'll tell you how, officer, why don't you look at my Furuno chart plotter right here and look at my track and look exactly where I was fishing. That's why I said to you earlier, you can't go back and forth, because you can't take an illegal, let me rephrase that. You can't take a legal catch in state waters and go into federal waters. So you have to decide, if I'm going deep dropping for tilefish, I'm not gonna go deep dropping for tilefish first thing in the morning, catch a whole bunch of them and say, all right, let's go dolphin fishing out offshore in the Gulf Stream. Can't do it. You're breaking the law if you were to get caught out there. So by law, you have to stay within state waters, because you can't transport that catch into federal waters, okay? Real quick, one more question and we're gonna move on.
You're anchoring or you're drifting?
You are drifting. You are always drifting. Whenever you are deep dropping, it is way too deep to anchor. You are always drifting, okay? Sometimes if you are drifting fast, like I said when I started this, anything under 2 knots, this is my outfit right here, anything under 2 knots. So when I get to where I'm fishing, I'll go out to an area where I know the gray tilefish are. I'm gonna stop the boat. Nobody drops a single bait down. I stop the boat, get our stuff together, get ready, and I drift for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And I look at my chart plotter and I can see my track, exactly where I'm going, how fast I'm going, what direction I'm going in, and then I will readjust. If there's some east wind and I'm being pushed into shallower water, I'm gonna start my drift in 450 because I know I'm gonna come across into 400. If I'm being pushed out with some west wind and the current's running up the beach, I'm gonna start my drift in 400 because I know I'm gonna get pushed out into 450. So you have to pay attention to the surrounding conditions and what you're dealing with. It's not as simple as just going out, stopping the boat, dropping a bait down, and loading up. Okay, it really isn't. You have to pay attention to what's going on. Do not look at your machine and hope that you're gonna see these fish on the bottom on your sounder, because you're not. I've got a kick butt Furuno sounder with a high power transducer, and when I go deep dropping, I'm not looking for individual fish on the bottom. I'm looking for the different types of bottom, what the substrate is made out of. Is it mud? Is it rocky? How dense is that machine, you know, that bottom? And for life, sometimes you'll see some little specks and some little life down there. But if you don't read anything, don't get alarmed. You're still gonna catch them. They're there. Because like I said, they hug the bottom and they live in burrows, okay? It's all a drifting game. You can sometimes, if you're drifting fast, put a sea anchor out and it'll slow you down a little bit. But if you're drifting excessively fast, there's not much that you can do. And also keep in mind, every single thing that I talk to you about today, when I say I go deep dropping, I want you to double everything that I'm doing, because never do we go out and only one rod, one guy is deep dropping. I'm in the stern deep dropping, there's a guy in the bow deep dropping. If we're fishing for tilefish, if we're going further offshore, whatever it is that we're doing, everything that we do, we double. Okay, all of our deep drop rods, everything. So we're essentially increasing our odds by 100%. Okay, but when you do that, you have to communicate. You have to work together as a team. If you're dropping your bait to the bottom, sometimes I'll wait and I'll go, did you hit the bottom yet? Yes, I just hit. Okay, now I'll drop down. Because we want to keep those rigs at different places. If you get one on and you're reeling up and you're just getting off the bottom and I get one on, I'll wait a couple seconds and give you some time to bring that up a little bit. We want to keep our rigs as far apart as we possibly can. Are we going to get tangled every now and then? Yes. Okay, we are. Especially when you get further offshore and you're dealing with a lot of current, it's inevitable. You're going to get tangled every now and then. That's part of deep dropping. Okay, it's part of fishing 2 or 3 rods. And again, on the shallower side, 400 to 450, there's been times we fished 4 rods, where 4 people have a rod under their arm and everybody's working together, everybody's dropping down and everybody's catching fish. Way offshore on the deep stuff, the most we'll fish is 2. So that's the whole gig with the tilefish right out here. Like I said, streamlined. I wanted everybody to see that, you know, again, deep dropping is not all about electric gear and, you know, really heavy stuff. It's very sporty, very comfortable. You can catch a lot of fish. They're here year round. I'm not going to sit here and, you know, tell you where to look. I'm telling you specifically, 400 to 450. That's where they are. Don't go out there and say, well, I didn't catch any. Where were you fishing? 460. Well, I told you they're not in 460. Okay, I was in 380. Well, I told you they're not in 380. And I know it sounds ridiculous, like how in the world a fish would know that he's in 420 feet of water and not 398 feet of water? I don't know that. Okay, I don't know that. But I'm telling you, because I know out of experience that they're between 400 and 450. Not to say that you're never going to catch one shallower than 400 or you're not going to catch one deeper than 450. You will. But to increase your odds tremendously, 400 to 450. Moving along, you know, we go out there, there's a lot, we go out there, you know, again, looking for the gray tilefish. Same scenario, we're looking for those gray tilefish, but that Gulf Stream is pushed in or there's an eddy or it's really windy, okay, and now the drift is fast. It's 3 knots, 3.5 knots, sometimes even 4 knots. We got to bump it up here a little bit, people, because 16 to 20 ounces of lead is not going to work. You drop that sinker down, you're just going and going and going. Man, where's the bottom? Going and going, because remember, your line is not, if your boat's up there and that's the bottom, your line is not just going straight down. There's a giant bow in the line. Okay, when there's a lot of current, there's a big bow in the line. Remember that. So it may take you 600 feet of line to get to the bottom. Really, so you have to take that into consideration. So when there's a lot of current, we bump it up on that shallower side. Come on now. Same rod, exact same 8-foot rod that we were just talking about right there. The difference here is we bump up our rig and we went from a 1-pound sinker to a 2-pound sinker. Okay, we doubled the amount of weight from a 1-pound lead to a 2-pound lead. However, we've also went from a manual reel to a power assist reel, because cranking 2 pounds of lead in 4 knots of current in 500 feet of water with 500 feet of line out, your arm's going to fall off. Okay, your arm's going to fall off. And I'm going to tell you something. There's this big argument, and I'm sure some of you may feel the same way, you know, about using electric reels and how sporty it is or how sporty it isn't. Hogwash. This is a tool. It is a specific tool that is used at a specific time. I'm not going out there fishing for sailfish with electric reels. I'm not going out there fishing for yellowtail snapper with electric reels. I'm using this only when I have to use this, okay? It's a tool. It's kind of like an electric kite reel, kind of like an electric downrigger. It's something that you specifically use at a specific time. If you don't want to, don't do it. I'll catch all the fish. Okay? Don't do it. Save them for me. I'm okay. Okay? I'll do it. So there are times when you need these electric reels. In this particular case, this is a Daiwa. It's like a Tanacom 750. They call this one the Mega Twin because it's a 2-speed electric reel. The handle still works. So if you want to crank away. But I'm telling you, it's got like a 1-to-1 gear ratio. Don't crank. Okay? It'll take you forever to get this thing off the bottom if you crank. So, but it's there, just in case that you want to. Has variable speed, so you can slowly increase that speed. Has a little digital readout, okay? So you know not how many feet, but how many revolutions, okay? How many revolutions. So don't look at that and go, oh, I'm at 172 feet, yards. What is that? It's revolutions. Okay, and it'll vary depending on the diameter of the line, how much line you have on the reel. Just use it as a reference. So I know if I go out there and I drop down the first time and it hits the bottom at 180, I know that usually at 180, I'm going to hit the bottom, okay? Same gig, but because I'm now using a power assist reel, I kind of bump things up a little bit. I went from the 30-pound test to the 50-pound test, the braid on the reel. Why? Because I'm no longer fishing 16 to 20 ounces. I'm now fishing 2 pounds, sometimes even 3 pounds. So my entire rig is heavier. Okay, everything is slightly heavier. And you will also notice I added a third hook. Okay, because now I don't need to manually crank. Now all I need to do is push a lever, so to speak. Okay, so I can have that third hook. And you'll also see that this rig is a little bit different. I added 3-way swivels on here, okay? Because again, it doesn't need to be as streamlined as the previous rig that we were just talking about, because I'm fortunate to have the power of the reel to help me retrieve this. So I've added that third hook right there. 3-way swivels, crimped on. I went from 100-pound test to 150-pound, okay? From 100-pound test to 150-pound. Because again, now when I hook 3 big tilefish at one time, doesn't happen every day, but certainly is going to happen if you put in enough time, you've got 3 big tilefish going in different directions. If this isn't strong enough, you're going to lose that fish, or you're going to lose your whole rig. Okay? And also, it's not uncommon out there in the deep, every now and then you'll catch something crazy, a shark, an amberjack, bluefish. We've caught big bluefish. Don't ask me why, but 450 feet down bluefish. Blackfin tuna we've caught right on the bottom. Okay, so you'll catch some strange stuff, but the bulk of your catch in that 400 to 450 will be those gray tiles. Same gig here, 50-pound braid, but now my top shot is 80 pound. Remember earlier, 30 pound braid, 50 pound top shot. 50 pound braid, 80 pound top shot. Rig, 3 hooks instead of 2 hooks, more weight. I've got the benefit of cranking manually if I want, but of course I have the power assist feature. This is fished under the arm. It's ultra light. This is not a huge, big, heavy-duty electric reel like we're going to talk about later. This is under the arm. It's still very sporty. If you don't think this is sporty, come deep dropping with me. I have a good time. Okay, we like it. You know, I do all kinds of crazy deep drop dances, all kinds of stuff. Okay, and it's light and it's fun, and you really can feel those fish. You can feel every shake of the head, even with this sort of tackle. Okay. Any questions about this right now? Yes.
Captain Mike, what's your guidance on snap swivels on this one and on the first rig?
It's an excellent question. So his question was, what's my guidance on the snap swivel? Well, remember, the heavier the rig, the heavier the weight, the heavier your snap swivel needs to be. So I can get away with a 75 pound or 100 pound diamond ball bearing snap swivel on this outfit, but I'll bump it up to a 150 or a 200 pound snap swivel on this outfit. And when we get to the next outfit, you'll see it's a 300 pound snap swivel. So as your terminal gear increases, as your weight increases, of course your swivel needs to increase as well. And again, the same little strobe light. These come in a variety of different colors. I like every color other than red, okay? But remember, there's a saying, no light, no bite. So it's always a good idea to include some sort of light on your deep drop rig, you know, really in any depth. It's not necessary, but it's helpful. Yes?
What knot do you use for your braid with your top shot?
So I'll tie a bimini twist, and then with an all-bright knot, I'll tie the top shot onto the loop, onto the bimini twist. It's nice and streamlined. You can see it's very small right on the reel, goes easily through the guides. If you, you know, some people you tie a uni to uni. I like the loop with an all-bright knot. And like I said, a bimini twist, you know, a surgeon's loop. Or I should say a surgeon's knot. There's a couple of different options. But
Like the PR knot?
I'm not saying I don't like it. That's what I'm very comfortable tying. You know what I mean? I can tie it with my eyes closed on a rocking boat. And that's what I suggest when it comes to any knot. You know, don't try and master 100 different knots. Don't do it, because you're better off picking a handful of knots that you use regularly and get really good at tying those knots. Okay, you know, I tie an improved clinch knot to my swivels. It is the most basic of fishing knots that there is. It's an improved clinch knot, but it's been in use for decades. I've used it for decades. I caught an 824-pound giant bluefin tuna on a knot like that, and after catching that fish, I said, I'm going to tie that knot all the time. Okay, I'm going to tie it all the time. I believe in that knot. Okay, and I never have a problem with even the most basic knots as long as they're tied properly. Okay, and don't let terminal tackle, don't let angler error enter the equation. You know, a bad knot, forget it, you're done. Okay, it's going to break. It's going to break. If you have a fray in your leader, it's going to part. So, you know, all of the basic stuff, this seminar isn't about the basic fundamentals of fishing, but of course it all starts there. You know, don't make those silly mistakes that could have been avoided because you're going to kick yourself in the butt down the line. Yes?
Is this the same as jigging? You can't effectively do it with mono?
So his question is this the same as jigging? You can't effectively do it with mono. And the answer is yes and no. Obviously, this is not jigging. We're deep dropping. However, you absolutely are going to have far more success fishing braid for a couple of reasons. Number one, as I mentioned earlier, it's so much thinner than mono. This 50-pound braid is about the equivalent of 12 or 15-pound test monofilament. So the thinner that line is going down the water column, the less weight that I have to fish in order to hold the bottom, because the less resistance there is to that water, and the less line that I'm going to need in order to get to the bottom. Plus, braid is ultra sensitive. I like to feel the bite, okay? And you'll feel every little bite with the braid. With monofilament, there's so much stretch, so much stretch. Remember, monofilament stretches 1/3 of its length. Excuse me, it's like a giant rubber band. It'll stretch 1/3 of its length before it parts, before it breaks. Okay, it's that elastic. Whereas braid, again, zero, near zero stretch. So to effectively be a successful deep drop fisherman in any venue, it's all about the braid. From snapper to swordfish, it's all about the braid. Yes, one question and then we'll get going here. So we're going to talk more about bait as well, but his question was the size of the squid. So remember that tilefish in particular, really all bottom fish, but since we're obviously on the subject of the gray tilefish, they don't swim very far away from their burrow. Because if they swim far away from their burrow, guess what happens? Somebody steals it. That's exactly what happens. You walk away from your house and leave all the front door and the windows open, eventually somebody's moving in, a squatter. Okay, same thing happens. So if you have too big of a bait, they're going to chase that bait, they'll nib at it, they'll grab it, they'll bite it, but at some point they're going to go nope, and they're going to go right back home. And you're going to miss that fish. So when it comes to the gray tiles, I either fished a small squid or I'll take a fairly medium squid that you buy in the 5-pound boxes that I'm sure they have in the bait freezer right here. And we cut it in half. You can use the head part with the tentacles, which I really like because it stays on the hook really well. Or you can use the tube part, the body part, and dangle that off the hook. Really, they're not very picky. Put something in front of them, they're going to eat it. You can use a large strip, okay, from a squid. You can use fresh, you can take a goggle eye, a bonita, and put some meat down there. But tilefish have these rubbery lips, these gray tiles. They feed on shrimp and clams and eels and worms and squid, of course. So you want to give them something that's easy for them to grab and easy for them to digest in their mouth. That's why I highly recommend the squid, above and beyond everything else. And like I said, you don't have to be too picky about it when it comes to the gray tilefish. Pretty simple there. We've talked about all of that. We've talked about where, we talked about when, 365 days a year, okay, as long as the conditions permit. Remember too, on the days when you think they're going to bite, they may not bite. They're there, but they may not bite. Certain factors have to come into play. Sunny days are always going to produce more than overcast, cloudy days. Don't ask me why that tilefish that's 420 feet below the surface looks up and says, I'm just not in the mood to eat today because it's cloudy and rainy. Okay, versus, yeah, I'm going to eat today because it's sunny and blue skies. I don't know that, but I'm telling you, you are going to experience a lot more success on the brightest days. They will not bite at night. Also, I've tried it. I've gone out there at night. We've caught them all day long. Here it is. It's getting dark. Let's keep fishing. Suddenly that sun, it's getting darker and darker, and the bite just fizzles out to nothing. And they don't bite at night. They don't do it, okay? So it's all a daytime game. What's really cool about it, you don't have to get up at the crack of dawn and say, hey, I'm leaving at 6. You don't. You can go anytime. Anytime. You can go for a couple hours. You can say, hey, it's 12 o'clock in the afternoon on a Sunday. Great time to go deep dropping because you've got how many yo-yos out there trolling around like this? Right? All right. I mean, ridiculous. You go out there, it's like a parking lot on the edge of the reef. And you want to go dolphin fishing, forget it. Every single weed line's been pounded 78 times. Okay, on Sunday, I'm only doing one thing. I'm going deep dropping. That's it, okay? However, I got a little trick up my sleeve, okay? I am never, ever do I go deep dropping without bringing a pair of dolphin rods, a pair of spinning rods. And every single time on every drift, before we drop our baits down, I'll take those same squid that we're fishing, the whole squid, I'll just put it on a hook, throw it off the side of the boat, one in the stern, one in the bow, and just drift. Okay, and remember the way the boat's drifting, my deep drop lines are going over here, and the current's taking my squid that's on top over here. You certainly could put a live goggle eye, a live pilchard, but why go through the trouble? Just put a squid on the hook. You're already fishing the squid anyway. 61% of the time, okay, you're going to catch dolphin when you're deep dropping. Not every time, but over 60%. And I say 61% because I know it's over 60%. Okay, that you will catch dolphin. I'm not saying they're always going to be, 30 to 40 pound fish. It might be a bunch of schoolies, but who doesn't like catching schoolies, right? We all do. I mean, it's fun, okay? So always have a couple of dolphin rods. Whenever you're deep dropping, you're doing double duty. You're deep dropping on this side, you're dolphin fishing on this side. And as you are bringing up those fish, they're spitting stuff out. You're throwing pieces of squid off the boat as you're cutting them and cleaning your fillet, your bait table. So you're almost creating this natural chum slick as you're drifting along. Okay, and of course, any dolphin that's nearby is going to see those baits and jump on them. So keep that in mind. Always have a couple of dolphin rods. I don't care how deep it is when you're deep dropping, make it a point to fish a couple of spinners on the off side of the boat. So we talked about all of that. Now let's move on to the next, we'll call it the next avenue, the next depth. So here in our area, in that 400 to 450, we've got the gray tilefish. We have the occasional vermilion snapper. We have the once every blue moon snowy grouper. We have the oddball amberjack or bluefish or shark or some crazy thing that just shows up every now and then. Okay, but then we have got to move on. And from that 450 to about 800 foot mark is almost barren out here. It's almost like the Dead Sea, the bottom. Okay, I'm not saying there's nothing out there, but I've tried, and I'll tell you, I just cannot find anywhere to really deep drop fish between 450, or I should say, you know, between that like 500 and 800 foot mark. However, as soon as I get to 800 foot, it's a whole new world out there, okay, a whole new world. You are no longer targeting the gray tilefish. You are now targeting the black belly rosefish. Everybody familiar with rosies? Okay. If you are not familiar with rosies, it is an absolutely gorgeous fish. Looks somewhat like a lionfish, okay, because it is in the scorpion fish family. It's got all of these spikes and thorns and looks wicked. It's bright orange with this beautiful pattern with these bright yellow eyes. And if you look in its mouth, its entire belly is black, pitch black. Hence the name black belly rosefish. They're rosy on the outside, pitch black on the inside. It is believed that the entire throat and stomach area is lined in that black skin, whatever you want to call it, to avoid predation from other predators. You know, a lot of the stuff that lives way down there in the deep flashes and glows, you know, squid, shrimp. So every time one of these black belly rosefish eats something like that, it's believed that that blackness inside of them contains all of that light, and it prevents that fish from being eaten by an even bigger fish, because it is a fishy fish world out there, okay? The rosefish, the black belly rosefish, are absolutely delicious when it comes to a great tasting fish for the dinner table. They're some of the best fish you will ever eat, comparable to deep water grouper, snapper, anything. Okay, they're that good. You've got to be careful when you're filleting them, because a couple of the spines that they have up on their back on the dorsal area do have a little bit of venom. And if you get stuck in your finger, it may or may not hurt. I don't know. I have to be honest. I've been handling these things for 20 years, thousands of them, and I've never once gotten stuck or, poisoned or anything like that. But just be careful. That's all I'm saying. Some people wear gloves. Some people take scissors and cut the fins off. But that's not even the point. The point is there's a lot of them out there. When I say a lot of them, carpeted. The bottom of the ocean is carpeted with black belly rosefish straight outside Hillsborough Inlet, all the way on up to Boca Inlet in 800 feet of water. Okay? You don't believe me? Go. Okay? I'm telling you, go. Right now. Go. They're there. I guarantee as soon as you get to the bottom. And I'm going to tell you one specific spot. If you're not sure where to go, directly east of the Deerfield Pier, okay, straight east of the Deerfield Pier, go to 800 feet of water. And there is a large depression that runs for about 3 miles from Deerfield to north of Boca. Right there. Fish right there. Okay? Fish right there. If you don't have a chart plotter, if you don't have a chart, if you don't know even how to read I don't care. They're right there. And it's not like X marks the spot. There's a huge area of these fish out there. Why are there so many of them? Anybody know why there's so many of them?
Nobody targets them?
No commercial fishermen target them. Because everything that commercial fishermen target, right? Okay? So if the commercial fishermen have no means of targeting these fish that are right on the bottom, in 800 feet of water where you're dealing with 4 or 5 knots of current, they're going to thrive because there's a lot of food out there as well. The bottom is jaggedy, there's ledges, there's depressions, there's hills, there's all kinds of structure offshore out here, all kinds of structure, okay? And these things are so abundant that often they're a pain in the butt because you're trying to catch that, but you can't because every single bait gets attacked by a black belly rosefish. Okay, and I don't care how many hooks you have, you can load up your entire stringer on black belly rosies. They're small, okay? They'll be, the small fish will be 1 pound. A big one will be 3 or 4 pounds. 5 is like a super mongo monster, okay? So that, you know, don't expect a fish this big, expect a fish this big. But it's worth it because the fillets that you'll get off that fish are just incredible. Okay, and they're a ton of fun to catch because they're so abundant. Great for novices, great for kids, great for anyone who's just trying to get into deep dropping because you want to achieve success, right? You don't want to go out there and deep drop and catch nothing. You want to go out there and load up and go, hey, look, this can work. I'm getting good at this, and get dialed in. But successful deep dropping in that 800-foot zone requires a different mindset, different tackle altogether. Okay? And keep in mind, the only thing that you will catch out there other than those rosies on the bottom is every now and then you will get lucky and catch the golden tilefish because he found one of the baits before the rosies did. Or every now and then you'll catch a barrel fish, but those are even more on the deeper side, which we're going to talk about next. On that 800-foot spot, and it varies. There's spots where it comes up to about 750 to 775, and then there's spots where it falls off to 850, 875. But if you used 800 as that kill zone, so to speak, you're going to find these rosies everywhere out here, and especially where I just told you, okay? But like I said earlier, you're dealing with a lot more current. You cannot go out there and fish with these rods under your arm with 1 or 2 pounds of lead and expect to hit the bottom 800 feet down with 4 or 5 knots of current out there on the edge of the Gulf Stream. I've tried. It's not going to work. Okay, it's not. You need at least 4 pounds of lead, at least. So remember on our first rod, we were at 1 pound and then we doubled it to 2 pounds. Now we're doubling it to 4 pounds. And can you do me a favor? Just hold that for me for a second. Okay, so we are fishing a 4-pound sash weight. And you are not cranking this up by hand from 800 feet of water with 5 black belly rosefish on here. You might be able to do it once and then you're gonna have a heart attack and die, okay? And that's gonna be the end of your fishing trip and the end of deep dropping for you. So you need some specialized equipment in order to really be effective at this. All starts, like I said, with the weight, minimum of 4 pounds to get you down there. Next is this particular rig. Now this is a unique deep drop rig made from Tormentor tackle, okay? This is not a homemade rig that I made. It is something that is pre-made, store-bought, and the guy convinced me, said, Mike, you need to try this rig. You'll catch fish 10 to 1, you know, versus a standard rig. And he's right. It works really, really well, okay? Really, really well. The reason it works so well is, number one, there's 5 hooks. So, of course, you have 5 chances, you know, and the more hooks that you have, the more bait that you have down there, the more of a natural chum slick that you're creating on the bottom, and the more of a competitive environment, a competitive atmosphere you're creating with these fish, because once one of these fish grabs a bait, he's freaking out on the hook. He's going crazy. It's like a feeding frenzy. The other fish are not looking at him going, dude, are you okay? They're thinking he's eating, and there's seriously some sort of feeding frenzy going on. So they come in and attack the other baits. So it's really easy to load up. Plus, when you're fishing that deep of water for a fish that averages 2 to 4 pounds, catching 2, 3, 4 at a time is the right way to go. Because it takes quite some time to reel up, even with an electric reel, 800 feet of line. Okay, it takes quite some time to reel that all the way back up to the boat, to rebait, drop that back down to the bottom. That's like a 10, 15 minute ordeal. 10, 15 minutes for one fish this big doesn't really sound worth it. 10, 15 minutes for 5 fish this big, now you're talking, okay? And keep in mind, it's very easy to go overboard. When you go out there, it's very easy to forget that suddenly you have 50 of these things in your cooler, okay? Because they're that easy to catch. There's that many of them. And you got to fillet them all back at the dock. And I can tell you, these black belly rosefish don't freeze all that well. They're really, really good, very much like gray tilefish. Incredible fish to eat fresh. Freeze it, okay, gets mushy, soft. I don't care how well you freeze it, just nowhere near as good as fresh, okay? So our rig in this instance as well, as you can see, is made on much heavier line, 300-pound test, 300-pound. It's pitch black down there. These fish are not line shy. They're not looking at the rig going, oh, I'm not going to eat that, the line's too thick. You know, not at all. It's a competitive world. You've got these squid that glow, the same gig with the circle hooks. You've got a nice whole squid. On these now, I fish whole squid, okay? Because remember, that's always a possibility, the big golden tilefish. So I want to make sure that there's something on here worth that fish committing for. Plus, I'm trying to weed out the small rosies, because there's some little ones down there too that are like the size of your palm. I'm trying to weed those out. I don't want to catch those. I want to catch the bigger ones. So I fish a whole squid on each one of these. And you can kind of imagine this, you know, imagine that rig on the bottom with 5 hooks and 5 whole squid fluttering across the bottom. That's pretty attractive for a fish, right? That attracts a lot of attention. And I think about it from the fish's point of view, okay? That I'm this fish down there and suddenly here comes 5 squids swimming by. Because remember, we're dealing with so much current. This rig does not just sit on the bottom. When you're talking about 4 knots of current, your rig is moving this fast across the bottom. Faster than you can walk. The average person walks 3 miles an hour. So your rig is moving faster than you can walk. Okay, so a lot is happening, and it's happening fast. They don't have a lot of time to think about things. They don't have a lot of time to evaluate. They just see a bunch of bait coming by, and they have to make a decision. Am I going to run out there, grab it, and eat it, or am I going to miss the opportunity? They're not looking at it and having a lot of time to evaluate, and they always decide to run out and eat it. Always, okay? They're always there, year-round. They're abundant year-round. Again, I told you exactly where to find them. You need a lot more lead. When it comes to tackle, we are not fishing for the rosies with a rod under our arm. We're not doing it. It's too much work. I've tried that too and regretted it. I had my leg up on the rail, had the rod up on my knee and going, what am I doing? Okay, it's just not the right scenario. So you're fishing out of a rod holder. In this case, just a chaos, you know, typical stand-up rod. We use this rod for a lot of different things, and of course for deep dropping as well, rated for 50 to 100-pound line. It's right in the rod holder, Daiwa Tanacom 1000. Essentially the same reel we just talked about, but more line capacity. More line capacity on here. Same speed, okay, same variable speed, digital readout, manual crank, a lot more line capacity, and I go from 50-pound braid to 60-pound braid. I bump it up just a little bit on this particular outfit for the exact same reason. I'm fishing a lot more weight, heavier swivel, bigger rig, more hooks, everything is bumped up. 60-pound braid, 100-pound monofilament top shot. Okay? Remember we had the 30-50, then we had the 50-80, now we have the 60-100. 60-pound braid with the 100-pound monofilament top shot. Very important. I have to stress, really important, that monofilament top shot. I'm going to say it again. Light, you know, on this particular rig, what I found is you don't need a light because these squids all glow. Okay, so you've got 5 glowing squid down there, and I've noticed that a light doesn't make a big difference. If I didn't have these glow squids on here, I would definitely fish a light on here as well. But for the rosies, just doesn't make a big difference, okay? Remember, same gig. This is at the rail. I'm fishing in free spool. I've got my thumb on the spool. I've got to make sure I stay in touch with the bottom. But with the rosies, that sinker is going to hit the bottom. You're going to lock up the reel, and in 1, 2, oh, there he is, he's eating it. That fast, okay? In 5 seconds, you are going to get a bite. Don't ask me how they find it that fast. The only explanation, there's just that many of them. They're everywhere out there, and literally in 5 seconds. So what am I going to do at that point? I'm actually going to let out a little bit of line, because if there's one right there, there's more than one, and I want to load up. Okay, I want to hook more than one at a time. So I'll let out a little bit of line, and I'll wait a couple seconds until I believe that there's at least 2 or 3 fish on there, and then I'll reel it back up. okay? Then I'll bring it all the way back up to the boat. And the same applies, you know, when I'm fishing for the rosies or when I'm fishing for the gray tiles. As soon as you hook that fish, circle hook, so you know you can slowly lift the rod tip up. And I'm not lifting the rod tip up to try and bury the hook in the fish. I'm lifting the rod tip up to feel the weight of the fish. If I feel the weight of the fish on there, he's hooked. He's on that hook. At first, you've got to take it easy. Use a little finesse getting that fish up off the bottom. He does not want to come up off the bottom. If it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever it is, gray tile fish, black belly rosies, they don't want to come off the bottom because they know off the bottom means what? Death. Okay, they know it's very unnatural, okay, to come off the bottom. They live right on the bottom. So you've got to use a little bit of finesse. Slow, slow. Don't be in such a rush. You got all this tackle, all this bait, all this gear, this beautiful boat. You ran out there. You got on top of the fish. Relax, slow. Get them up off the bottom slow. The higher in the water column that fish comes, may it be one or multiple fish, now you can speed it up a little bit. I've seen so many guys will drop it to the bottom, they get a bite, they go, zzz, and they put the thing in overdrive. And the rod goes, zzz, pop, and something breaks. Okay, the weakest link breaks. They're just putting too much pressure too fast. Slow it down, a little bit at a time. You may even want to use the handle, the crank, to bring the fish up off the bottom. And remember that these power assist reels have a drag. Everybody know what a drag is? Okay, they have a drag. Use it. Okay, use it, seriously. They have a drag. So you have to use that drag just like you would on any other reel to prevent being busted off. What's also important to mention, I'm kind of just going to get a little bit off subject here, a little bit off topic for a second. Obviously, these power assist reels need power, okay, in order for this to be a power assist reel. There's a couple of different ways to do that. When you purchase these reels, they come with a power cord, and at the end of that power cord are alligator clips that you can simply clip on to a 12-volt battery. So you can bring a deep cycle battery with you, clip the reel right to a battery, and you can use that. On my CV, I've got 4 Hubble 12-volt plugs, strategically placed, 3 along one side of the boat and 1 on the opposite side of the transom in the back corner in the cockpit. Because there's times when the boat will be drifting sideways, so one guy could fish up in the bow, one guy could fish in the stern. There's times, depending on the conditions, that the boat may turn and be drifting straight north, so now we'll fish 2 right off the stern, side by side. Okay, but having those Hubble plugs is really a nice feature. But you've got to make sure that your cable is well protected because these reels are notorious for the cable failing. Dia will hate me for telling you this, but I'm going to tell you the truth. You better get a spare cable, okay? You better get a spare cable because there's nothing more frustrating than going out there, going deep dropping, and suddenly your screen goes off. And you're like, what? And everything you try and do, you can't get the thing to work. And that's because your power cord, where it plugs into this little spot, has like almost like a 90-degree bend, and the wires inside there get damaged. So always have an extra power cord with you. Otherwise, you're going to be going like this, bringing it all the way up off the bottom. And after you do it one time, you're going to go, dude, we're going home. Okay, just like that. Okay, we're going home. So just keep that in mind. You know, the power is an important option. Yeah, it's going to be a long day. So with the bait for the rosies, again, the whole squid is really good. Any sort of, bonita chunks, anything. They will eat anything. And one thing that I highly recommend you do, the smallest rosie that you catch, take that rosie, butterfly it. In other words, fillet it from the back forward, take out the bony part in the middle so you have just the head and the 2 flaps, and put that sucker on one of the hooks and leave it on one of the hooks. Because guess who eats that? That, okay? So always leave one of those rosies butterflied on your rig, and 9 out of 10 times, that's what you're gonna catch the golden on, because all of the squid is being attacked by the rosies faster than that golden tilefish could ever even get to it. Okay, so always put a big bait on one of the hooks. And because you have the power assist in the electric reel, you can do that. You can bring up all of that weight, so to speak. You're not doing it manually. Do not go out there with inferior tackle. Okay, I'm telling you, when you get out to that depth, it becomes very, very challenging. There's, you're dealing with a lot of current, you're dealing with a lot of weight. You go out there with inferior tackle, 30-pound braid and try and do that, it's not gonna hold up, okay? Fish with a light rod that you would fish for dolphin with and try and do that, it's not gonna hold up. You need some pretty beefy gear because you're dealing with these extreme elements. Like I said, the current, the amount of weight, all of these different factors, okay? If you don't have the right gear, get it. I hear they're having a special at a sale here tonight or something, okay? Yes.
Where did you get the rig from? Tornado Tackle or
I'm not sure if Marshall has them, but I did notice that they do have some pre-made deep drop rigs, which essentially are the same. They've got a glow tube on them. They may have those as well. Those are from Tormentor, okay? Yes.
I use that reel on my kite rod. Would you suggest changing the rod or?
So he said, I use that same reel on my kite rod. A lot of people do this. I used to do this too. I'm fortunate now. I've got different power assist reels for different applications. However, there's absolutely no reason in the world why you can't use your kite reel to go deep dropping. Of course, the only thing you have to do is prior to that trip, pull out all of your kite clips and your swivels, put them on an empty spool, put it aside so you don't have to re-rig the whole thing, and then you certainly can use that exact same reel deep dropping. I'm sure you're not using a bent butt rod as a kite rod, you know what I'm saying? So you're not going to use your kite rod, a short little kite rod for deep dropping. So of course you need to switch it and put it on the appropriate rod. But the reel can serve double duty, 100% can serve double duty. And those are really light. That's what's nice about these Daiwa Tanacoms, these power assist reels. They're light. Okay, you can take it out of the rod holder. You can hold it under your arm. It's still sporty, people. It is. Okay, I promise you it is. Okay, no, it's not the same as manually cranking. Of course it's not. But anytime anybody wants to go head to head with me, we'll go out there and fish in 800 feet. I'll fish with that. You fish this way. And at the end of the day, we'll look in each other's buckets. Okay, you need the right tool for the right job at the right time. Okay, yes.
Just to be clear, because you emphasize the importance of the top shot. One, what's the length of the top shot? And two, is there any variation in that length between?
No, 30 to 50 foot.
Okay.
Okay, 30 to 50 foot top shot is all that you need. And keep in mind, they also sell, and I know Marshall does here too, pre-made top shots that have a loop, okay, with like a piece of Dacron. And now all you need to do is connect those loops with like a cat's paw, loop-to-loop connection. And if you're not sure how to do that, the instructions are right on the back of the package, literally step-by-step instructions. So you certainly can use a pre-made wind-on leader, and they sell them in 25 foot, they sell them in 50 foot. Either of those will work. If if you don't have the right monofilament and you don't want to buy a big spool of 100-pound test or this or that, just buy that specific wind-on leader and you can easily connect that right to your reel, okay? Yes?
I noticed that all your deep drop rods have a soft tip. Is that?
Absolutely. So he said, he noticed, and he doesn't miss much, this kid, that all of my deep drop rods have a soft tip because I want to detect the bite, number one. I want to see that bite. Okay, even though I could feel it, I want to see it so I can react accordingly. And I like that rod to have some shock absorbing factor. Remember, that boat's going up and down. You've got a 4-pound lead that's bouncing up and down, up and down. You've got 3 or 4 fish that are going in 3 or 4 different directions. There's so much going on in that rig. You need something to absorb all of that as that boat goes up and down, rocking in the waves when you're reeling that up. That's the best way for me to explain it. If you're fishing a pool cue and there's no give whatsoever, you're going to end up losing fish. You're going to lose fish because there's nothing to give and you're going to pull hooks at a fish all day long. Now, before we move on to the ultra deep, okay, and when I say ultra deep, I mean beyond the rosies, I mean beyond 1,000 feet of water. I want to just touch on real quick circle hooks. I brought this up before. There are a lot of different types of circle hooks. I'm a VMC guy. I fish VMC hooks exclusively across the board. I'm very, very happy with them. They've got a huge variety of hooks for any application that you can possibly think of. There's a lot of other great hook manufacturers out there. You know, whatever works for you works for you. Like I said, I'm a VMC guy. Even their circle hooks, they have a tournament circle hook. Tournament circle hook. What's the definition of a tournament circle hook? Somebody tell me, and you could have this pack of tournament hooks by show of hands. What is the definition of a tournament circle hook? Straight. So what he said by straight, and I'll give you this at the end of the show, is it's not offset. It's straight. It's inline. The entire hook is straight, like this. That is a requirement in all billfish tournaments to have an inline tournament circle hook, okay? Extremely effective at catching fish right in the corner of the mouth. You can have the same hook in what's called a shore set circle hook. Shore set. The difference here is this is offset, okay? This is an offset hook. It's not straight. The bend bends a little bit. This does a little bit more, or the logic behind this shore set hook is that it's going to be a little bit more effective at hooking fish because it isn't perfectly in line. The truth of the matter is it works really, really well, but so do the inline circle hooks. The tournament circle hooks work extremely effective as well. But then you have something called a nemesis circle hook, okay? Same hook, offset. The difference here is this is stronger. It's thicker, has a thicker gauge wire that this hook is made out of, okay? The nemesis circle hook. So if I'm targeting something like tuna, I may want a stronger circle hook. If I'm targeting something like amberjack and I'm putting a lot of heat, a lot of drag on that reel, I may need that heavier circle hook, right? Because I don't want that hook to bend. So not all circle hooks are created equal. On the deep drop side of things, I try and shy away from the thicker gauge hooks. I like the thinner gauge hooks because they're thinner and they're easier to penetrate that fish's mouth. And when he's 500, 800, 1,200 feet away, I want the hook to be as effective as it can possibly be. So when you're purchasing circle hooks or when you're purchasing deep drop rigs, you'll see a lot of them are rigged with this kind of hook, okay? A different type of circle hook, and you can see how thick it is, okay? It's really, really thick gauge. It's a super strong hook. It's got a huge eye, so you can put 400-pound test, 500-pound test monofilament through that eye, okay? This is a great circle hook for making deep drop rigs when you're fishing in the Bahamas in 1,600 feet of water for a 150-pound Warsaw grouper. That's the right hook. When you are fishing for rosies that weigh 3 pounds in 800 feet of water, okay, off the South Florida coast, that is not the most effective hook to use. Not to say that you're not going to catch fish, because you will, but you don't need that. It's overkill, okay, it's overkill. As far as hook size is concerned, for the tilefish, 4.0 or 5.0 is perfect for the gray tilefish. For the rosies, I like at least a 9.0. I have found that a 9.0 hook right there is the right hook, is a 9.0 hook. Nothing smaller than 9.0. Those black belly rosefish have big mouths, huge mouths. It's like that big. It's crazy. You can fish a 16.0 hook, okay, and they'll still get it in their mouth. So I like a bigger hook with a nice big gap. Plus I know that anytime that may eat one of my baits. So I don't want to be undergunned with a small little 4.0 or 5.0 thin wire hook. So I bump it up, like I said, to that 9.0 hook. On the ultra deep water side of things, you can fish a 13.0. You can fish a 15.0. You're not going to fish a hook that's too big. These fish have big mouths. They don't nibble. Okay, they don't nibble. They swallow, they engulf, they inhale. And any hook that you have, it's going to fit in their mouths, okay? So nothing smaller than a 9.0. Who was that got that right? There you go.
I've actually found with the rosies, I've been experimenting a bigger hook, I'm getting a better hookup ratio. I'm getting
100%, no question. So he said with the rosies, I'm fishing bigger hooks and getting a better hookup ratio. Okay, and that makes perfect sense. These fish have big mouths. You fish a tiny, I don't want to say a tiny, but a 5.0 hook, it's too small. It's easy for it to come out of their mouths. It doesn't have enough bite, to really grab that fish. So don't be afraid to fish a big hook, but a strong hook. And remember today, you know, like VMC's hook. These things are made out of vanadium steel. I have no idea what in the world vanadium steel is. All I know is it's strong, okay? That's really all that matters to me, is it's super strong. It's almost impossible to bend this thing. You know, the hooks, today's modern hooks, are so much stronger, lighter, and thinner than the hooks that we had 20 years ago, aren't they? Okay, they've come so far. So take that, use that to your advantage, you know. It's not only in the hooks, it's in the braid, it's in the fluorocarbon, it's in the swivels, it's in everything. Everything has gotten smaller, lighter, and stronger. And a lot of the ratings, sometimes you'll see, like even on the swivels, okay, you'll see all these new little barrel swivels and snap swivels that are like micro swivels, and it says rated for 110 pounds. I'm like, get the hell out of here. That's not a 110-pound swivel. So I decided to do a test, and I got about literally 30 to 40 different swivels from different companies and different ratings, went over to Linger and Pittman, who has a big computerized line testing machine, and spent 9 hours, made a cable harness, and I tested 3 of each swivel and averaged the breaking strength. And the truth of the matter is that 98% of every swivel we tested broke at or above its rating. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, how does that tiny little swivel break at 115 pounds? But they do, okay? So you got to believe in that, okay? So the next thing beyond the rosies, and also keep in mind the dolphin rods. Don't forget to put your dolphin baits out. When you're fishing for those rose fish, you're in 800 feet of water. Where a dolphin? 800 feet of water, okay? So don't forget to put your dolphin rods out. So the next thing now is going ultra deep. Now we're fishing, I don't want to say swordfish grounds, because when we fish for daytime swordfish, we're in 1,600 to about 2,000 feet of water. We're not deep dropping in 1,600 to 2,000 feet of water in 5 knots of current for anything other than swordfish. However, in that 800 to 1,200, and especially the 1,000 to 1,200 foot range, you're going to find golden tilefish, and you're going to find barrelfish. Anybody ever catch barrelfish? You do? Okay. They are one of, first of all, they're one of the slimiest fish that you will ever catch. You bring them up in the boat, and they just exude slime. It's like oh, I mean, literally, slime just comes off of them. It's a very good eating fish, tastes like cobia to me. Looks like a giant overgrown pompano, but brown, okay? It's part of like the pomfret family, and a super, super hard fighting fish. Will fight from the bottom to the top and will not give up until you sink a gaff in that thing, okay? Super hard fighting fish. They will live right on the bottom, and they will also swim up to a couple 100 feet off the bottom in that ultra deep water out there. But when you're fishing out there in that ultra deep water, you need a lot of lead. 4 pounds isn't going to cut it. You're never going to get to the bottom and hold the bottom with 4 pounds. So we usually fish with at least 8 pounds. And what I found was a downrigger ball. An 8 or 10 pound downrigger ball gets hung up in the bottom a lot less than a long sash weight, okay? So it tends to just bounce off the structure. And don't ask me why, something to do with the shape, but all of the guys that are really successful at barrel fishing are using the downrigger balls rather than using the long stick weights that we generally fish for the swordfish. Keep in mind, it's an expensive sinker, 50 bucks. Okay, so if you lose it, you're out 50 bucks. However, because you're fishing so much weight, even that sort of tackle, and certainly the tackle under your arm or even that rosy tackle, is not heavy enough. It's not heavy duty enough. So now we're really using our swordfish gear. We're using either a big LP or, you know, something really big, like I'm about to show you this tow truck here. Okay, this is a new reel from Crystal Fishing. Okay, it's their new broadbill. Holds 9,000 feet of 80-pound test. 9,000 feet. This is the Mac Daddy. This is the Mac Daddy of deep drop reels right here. It doesn't matter. You're not holding this under your arm. You're not going like this, you know. It's matched up to a kick butt chaos rod. You know, I mean, this is about as high tech as you can possibly get and as powerful as you could possibly get when it comes to deep drop reels, okay? It's got the handle, it's got a digital readout, has the wind on, and while you may look at this and say, oh my God, that is just completely overkill, the truth of the matter is it really isn't. When you're fishing 8 pounds, 10 pounds, 12 pounds of lead, and you're fishing in up to 1,200 feet of water, and you're dealing with 5 or 6 knots of current, okay, and you're catching fish now, we're not talking about 2 to 3 pound rosies. We're talking about potentially golden tilefish that size and barrel fish that are that size or bigger. Your average barrel fish is 15 to 30 pounds. Okay, you're talking about big fish, deep water, big baits, same rig, that same multiple hook rig with the squid works offshore there as well. Big, heavy duty rig. But you really need something like this. Doesn't have to be a crystal, could be an LP. There's not a lot of options out there. Hooker electric is another, option. There's a couple more, but you need the Mac Daddy of them all if you're serious about doing that ultra deep water deep dropping. I would not suggest that you start your deep dropping career with that in 1,200 feet of water, okay? I would suggest that you start in the 400 to 450 and work your way up and work your way out and refine your tactics along the way, okay? And remember, if you're not successful the first time, don't give up, okay? Try again and call me and say, Mike, I went out there, did everything you said, I didn't catch shit. What happened? Excuse my language. So, why didn't I catch anything? And I'm going to talk to you about it and say, well, where were you? What were you doing? What was the current like? What kind of bait were you using? How was your rig? There's so many different variables, okay? There's so many different variables that you have to take into consideration. Rigging, any weak flaw is going to be exploited. Any weak link, you're going to regret it. I promise you, you're going to end up regretting. You're going to lose a rig. You're going to lose some tackle. You're going to lose some fish. Don't let tackle failure enter the equation. I've said this in all of my seminars, and when I'm 6 feet under on my headstone, it's going to say, don't let tackle failure or angler failure enter the equation, because that's what I live by. I try and control everything that I can possibly control, okay? Because I know that there are factors that I can't control, okay? You're going to get hung up in the bottom. You can't control that. I'm telling you, you're going to get hung up in the bottom. You're not going to get hung up in the bottom when you're fishing for gray tilefish because they live in the mud. So the worst that's going to happen is your sinker is going to get buried in the mud, and you're going to feel like you're hung up, and it's going to go pop, and the sinker is going to pop right out of the mud, and you'll be fine. But when you get out there to that 800, 1,000 foot, 1,200, there are some spots out there that are so jaggedy and rocky. I remember one day going out there, dropped to the bottom. It hit the bottom. I locked up and the rod went whoop, hung up. Okay, before I was even able to take the slack up, I was hung. Lost that rig. And let me tell you something, with a big LP, with 80-pound braid, and that kind of rig, it's not easy breaking that out of the bottom. Okay, I'm telling you, that'll hold your boat. Okay, it's not easy breaking that out of the bottom. Re-rigged, drop back to the bottom, same exact thing happened. Okay, there are spots out there that are so rocky and jaggedy, you are going to get hung up. It's inevitable. Don't get frustrated, just slow it down. Sometimes you may have to drop down and try and reel that rig a little bit off the bottom, but that's tough to do when you've got so much line out and you're dealing with these elements, so much current. So you really have to kind of get dialed in and seasoned to that point. But it all starts on the shallower side, and that's what I recommend. And remember, slow down, enjoy it. Don't get freaky and make mistakes that could have been avoided that are going to cost you tackle and that are going to cost you fish. Just like you have to avoid tackle failure, you have to avoid angler failure, because we've all made mistakes. Has anyone not made a mistake out there while fishing? Liar, liar, liar. We all have. Okay, we've all made these stupid mistakes where you look back and go, oh my God, what was I thinking? I should have switched that leader. I should have did this. I should have gapped. I should have, whatever it is. And especially when you're deep dropping with this kind of stuff, it's a two-man gig, okay? It's a two-man gig. You got a long leader. You got to be careful. Okay, you got to work together. You got to communicate. Okay, but when all of the pieces to the pie come together and all the pieces to the puzzle come together, you can have an absolutely awesome experience. And remember, deep dropping, not something you're going to do every day. Okay, it's not. It's not something where my only gig is I'm going deep dropping. No, it's something that's in your arsenal. You know, you're a good, well-rounded angler that likes to enjoy all of the different fisheries that we have available here. But if you're not also taking advantage of this fishery, you're missing out, because this is a fishery that's very unique. There's a lot of fish out there. It's not seasonal. You know why it's not seasonal, or it's not as seasonal as dolphin fishing and wahoo fishing and everything else? Because the bottom is so much less influenced by the conditions. In other words, wintertime or summertime, doesn't matter. The water temperature, 800 feet down, is the same. Okay, doesn't matter. It's the same. Wintertime or summertime. So remember that the environment that these fish live in is nowhere near as affected as, for example, dolphin and other pelagic species that are up on top. Plus, it's a great backup plan. Deep dropping is an awesome backup plan when you go dolphin fishing and it doesn't pay off. You know what? I don't want to come home empty-handed. I like fresh fish. I don't know about you guys. I like fresh fish. Okay, and if I'm going to stop on the way in real quick to catch a dozen or 2 dozen rosies to have a fresh fish dinner, I'm going to do it. Okay, so it's a great backup plan. It's a great thing to do on a weekend, like I said, when there's a million boats or there's tournaments going on and you don't want to be anywhere near the edge. Take a couple, take a break and go do something else. It's a great tactic that doesn't require you to get up first thing in the morning. Okay, at the crack of dawn to get out there. You can go out there any time of the day. You don't have to devote the entire day to it. And it's fun. It's exciting to me to be able to fool a fish that lives in the pitch black, is exciting. Not only to fool them, but to get them. To persuade that fish off the bottom all the way up into the boat is extremely rewarding. And I'm sure that it'll be extremely rewarding for you too. That's South Florida deep dropping.